Well, good afternoon. So no one wants the speaking spot after lunch? Yes? Everyone, kind of the blood rushes to the stomach as we digest a wonderful meal. But I want to thank you for coming to the session. I know we got a few people just trickling in real quickly, but I just want to share just a little bit, and I kind of want to hear from all of you. This is really more of a dialogue than anything else. I do have some pieces to share with you about clear and present danger. I thought it was one of the newer mandates that we have in Illinois now, about 2 years into this mandate. And if you are a school counselor practicing now, my hunch is you know about clear and present danger and may or may not be involved in reporting clear and present danger. Schools have worked with this in a variety of different ways. So I'll offer a caveat first. This is reflective of what's happening in my school, in the threat assessment that we use here, and I've shared with you a lot of resources, not all of which I'll go through, just for you to take back. I gave you the threat models from our school and where clear and present danger fits inside that threat model. But I've heard a lot of questions about clear and present danger, and that's why I thought it might be helpful to have a conversation around this and give opportunity for people to ask some questions. So, but I am curious to make sure I hit the target, because I'm not quite sure why everyone came to this session, whoever in the room. What are some of the takeaways you want to make sure you get today from the session to make sure I hit that? Like you came here like, I really want to know this. No, thank you. So the question was, a teacher had some questions about how did you know the student was in danger or not in danger. I don't know if that was the scenario, but it sounds like the teacher wanted some more information about how did you assess the threat. Yeah, no, definitely. I'll definitely talk about that. Please. Yeah, and thanks for asking that question. It really is just about legalities of the school counselor's role in reporting clear and present danger. And you mentioned psychologists and social workers, probably their roles as well. I won't answer that question yet, but I will answer that question in the presentation. Well, I'll give you some ideas about it. I don't know if I have an answer for it. Anything else? Yes, please. Just some thoughts about that. So how I would expand that even to just assessing threats that are technology-based. Yeah, I have some thoughts about it. I don't know if I have answers, but I do have some thoughts. Okay. Well, if some other kind of learning targets come up, really want me to talk about today, please don't hesitate to say something. I'm more than happy to pause and reflect on a specific issue, because I want to make sure you leave here with a couple of tools. If I don't get through everything, this is my disclaimer. My presentation is already on the ISCA website. My email address is there too. I'm at Downers Grove South High School. Just call me and we'll talk some more, okay? I'm not going anywhere. I'll be there for a long time. So, but I think it's always important for presenters to know where they're coming from, so you understand where the information, how it's conceptualized. I am an assistant principal for counseling and student support services at Downers Grove South High School. I've been in that role for 10 years. Prior to that, I was a school counselor at Downers Grove South. And prior to that, I did student assistance work and worked in corrections for a little bit, and did a lot of work in drug treatment as well, all with adolescents. It's been the primary focus of my work in counseling. And prior to that, I was a teacher of music, which was a great job, which I loved. At my school, and this is important to say, I did this presentation in Springfield a couple weeks ago, and it was a little bit of a shock to me, and I should have thought about it, and I didn't. But I learned a lesson in the presentation. When I said, I'm in a school of about 2,800 students, and I have 11 counselors that I supervise. I have 3 social workers, 3 psychologists. I supervise the nurses. And so I have 19 professionals in the department. And the school counselors in that conference were all going, I'm all by myself. I do all of that. And so I had some thoughts about threat assessment and how that happens. And we had more of a conversation about engaging community support services, village support services, where they were not isolated in the process of threat assessment. But that was pretty interesting. Here we tend to see a little bit larger high school, but maybe you only have a couple of people in your building that might be in charge of doing this kind of work. Help if I turn it on. There we go. So here's just a couple of targets that I thought that we would try to get to today. Just increasing your understanding of threat assessment and how clear and present danger fits inside that threat assessment. Yeah, and just some procedures about this, okay? So pretty specific presentation. So to start us off, just understanding threat assessment, just take just a couple minutes and just share with a couple of folks sitting next to you, one person, two people, whatever, and just share an experience that you've had when there has been a threat. Either the student has threatened to harm themselves, that counts, or they've threatened to harm someone else, or groups of people. I am going to be a little irreverent in this session because it's kind of a heavy topic in a way. So, one of my favorite threats, I'm going to kill the whole cross-country team. That kind of thing. We enjoyed that one. Real life threat, I know, I don't mean to lie to it, but you got to laugh in all this stuff too a little bit because it gets, threats get a little intense sometimes in crisis situations. So just take a couple moments and share a threat experience, positive or negative, and I'll ask a couple people to share out what happened in your scenario. Okay. So reflect on what you heard or said, whether or not both of you got to share a story or not. For how many of you did the story contain, the story that you just shared, or the story you heard, did it contain your personal response or experience in the scenario? How you experienced it? Anybody have that in their story? Like, I was really this in this story, or I really felt this, or I was really worried about this. And any kind of I statements in the story. I have a few head nods, okay. For how many of you was it more of a story about the process and what occurred in the threat? Okay. How many positive stories do we have where the threat assessment worked out really well and the right thing happened and the kid got the assistance they needed and it was clean? Okay, so how many, that's our goal, right? How many had a threat assessment story where it was a little bumpy and there were some hiccups in the process and a lot of chefs in the kitchen and some people were very excited about what was going on with the threat, others were trying to maintain kind of a level head in the process, and getting in the way was probably the student need, but that kind of fell to the wayside trying to work out all the process. Or somewhere in between. Yeah, I heard a lot of that going on. And that's what I often hear when people tell me about their threat assessment experiences, is that, yeah, this is really about what happens with the adults in the process and how the adults know what they're supposed to do. I'll just say at the core of this is about students, and that goes without saying, you know that. But in this process of threat assessment, it's easy to forget that. It's easy to get wrapped up in the process of it with the adults involved and lose track of what's happening with the student and or students and what their experience is in the threat. Yeah, I could talk a lot about that. I won't talk any more about that, but that's just a thought. So I thought we'd start off with a case study, just to give you an idea about where my thinking is around threat assessment and to clarify again, because it's one of the pieces I hear that confuses folks about clear and present danger. It is about threat to self or threat to others. When it first came out, there was a lot of understanding that it was about threat to others. That this was, I'm going to shoot up the school kind of threat. But it is about threat to self as well. And that's right in the clear and present danger law that you can find on the Illinois State Police website. I also gave you the forms for the clear and present danger law as well. So just a quick case study, just to kind of ground ourselves in this work. So Jana's a 16-year-old high school student. Her English teacher brings a journal written by Jana to the school counselor as the teacher was alarmed by the student's references to dark imagery and the hopeless tone of the writing. The counselor reviews the writing and seeks out Jana for an initial interview. During the interview, the following information is revealed. Jana is sad over the recent breakup with boyfriend and feels isolated from peers, believes parents have no idea how she's feeling. During the interview, she's sad. The sadness dissipates and Jana becomes cold, offering little response to questions. Jana speaks vaguely about intent to harm herself and others because no one cares. She comments about getting back at the teacher for showing the counselor the journal entry. I know. Anybody has a scenario kind of like this, sort of like this? It always happened. Are there English teachers in the room? I love English teachers. But for some reason, English teachers love to give this unpack your bag assignment at the end of your senior year and share all of the things that you've kept to yourself. Oh, those are really fun times. We try to keep them from doing that. But English teachers love to do that. We also get this from health teachers. Health teachers like to unpack this stuff in the classroom. There's just kind of a caveat to say build relationships with those groups of teachers. Social studies teachers from time to time enter into this world depending on the course they're teaching. But English is my favorite. Yeah. So what kind of threats do you see here? Both threat to self and threat to others? What's the threat to other? Getting back at the teacher. Yeah, that's a threat, right? I'm going to get back at that teacher. We don't know what the threat means. We don't know the severity of the threat. We don't know if it's a threat of imminent harm. I'm going to come back to that phrase a number of times. Imminent harm is the assessment standard in clear and present danger. So if people are confused about what is reportable under clear and present danger, it's imminent harm. I have a plan to do this, and when I leave here, I'm going to do it, whether it's a threat to self or a threat to others. Okay? So in this scenario, we talked about that there is a threat. What additional information would be helpful in determining the seriousness of the threat? What else do you want to know? Yes, please.
If she had a plan in place already?
Yeah, did you have a plan for herself or the teacher, right? What would lead you to believe she might have a plan for herself? Yeah. Was there something in what she said that led you to believe that there might be a plan?
No.
Hopelessness. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, there's some things there, right? Some things to explore. Some things I would want to know more about in my assessment of the threat. Okay? For how many of you would you listen to this story from Jana and say, you know what, I think everything's going to be okay. Why don't you just go back to class and see how you feel? Right. No, we wouldn't do that. Okay? 20 years ago, we might have. Well, this has changed. So we know that we're hanging on to Jana. We're going to learn more about Jana. What else would you want to know to determine the threat? Ask her some questions.
Maybe the nature of her relationship with her parents.
Okay. Because maybe there's something going on there too. Okay. Yeah, possibly. Yeah, thank you, Nathaniel. I appreciate that. Yes, please.
Lethality or access to means of harming somebody or themselves.
Boy, thanks, Rochelle, for saying this. So the number one way successful suicide is by what means? Firearms, right? Overwhelmingly firearms. Unfortunately, students tend to think it's pills. Pill overdose represents about 2 to 3% of overdose in adolescents. It is about firearms. So it's about assessing firearm access. It is now in our threat model at our school. When we talk to parents, does the student have access to firearms? And that's relatively new for us, but that's just come out in a big research study out of Carthage around asking about that specific element in a threat assessment. Would clear and present danger apply based on what we just know about this situation? Who says yes? A few yeses. Yeah? Who says no? Who says they're not sure? And that's okay, yeah. Yeah, not sure. In my role, I do a lot of consultation with the counselors that I work with. It's not unusual for a counselor to come to me and say, this is what's going on, where are we going to be with this situation? And I might say, oh, I might want to know about this, ask a few more questions about this. This might be where we are in the process. You're going to see in our threat model, it's one of the handouts in there, we put students into 3 categories under threat: low risk, moderate risk, and high risk. So we're determining which level of risk they're falling into. and then our actions follow that. Yes, please.
Do you use your own threat assessment, or you adopted a threat assessment from some of the ones?
You're talking about a formalized instrument? I'm going to talk about that when I get to the threat model. I promise I'll answer that question. But it'll make more sense when I talk about it in the threat model, though. Yep. Yep. The question was, do we use a standardized threat assessment or a suicide assessment scale? Ray Pagettini did a fabulous presentation this morning. If you were here, he gave more resources on suicide prevention than I've ever seen in any one place at one time. The handout was just amazing. But there were some screeners in that guide too. But I'm going to talk about screeners in general, okay? Okay, so we're not quite sure if this is clear and present danger. It sounds like we might need to know a little more information before we determine it. Yes? That's kind of where I am. I don't know enough yet. And I think that's an important place to be for determining where we are on this one. So threat to self and others. It's not, this isn't something you don't know about. We are more hypersensitive about threat than we have been in the past. So just personal story, anybody see the short news bite, what was it, Wednesday night? About Valparaiso University? Yes? Okay. So my daughter's a sophomore at Valparaiso. And it was a really interesting exchange with her because their campus went to shelter in place. Shelter in place, you still do what you're doing, you just don't leave where you're at. We understand that terminology, I think. It wasn't lockdown, shelter in place. But as we're talking to her, you could hear how the electronic communication was escalating on the Valparaiso University campus. And when we talked to her at 9:30, she said, we're not quite sure what's going on. When I talked to her at 10, there were 2 live shooters on campus, is what she said. When we talked to her at 10:30, it looks like nothing has happened. When we talked to her at 11, they were allowed to leave wherever she was in her theater rehearsal. They didn't get any rehearsing done, but they were able to go back to the dorm. And it was interesting to hear how she was experiencing, once I got out of my parent role and being worried about how my daughter was doing at school. I was concerned. I don't feel like I was so detached from it. But I really separated myself from the experiences to say, what was really going on and what was she experiencing in that threat? And what I heard and what she said and what her friends were saying is this hypersensitivity to threat. It's just part of our culture now. And I'm not saying that's good or it's bad, it just is. And it was an important piece for me to realize this week, but something I've been aware of for a while now, that with our sensitivity to threat, because of what's occurred, either in schools or in other places where there has been mass casualties because of terrorist incidents or whatnot, I think just people experience that hypervigilance just differently. And as I have worked through threats in my building, I have noticed that as well. And so I need to really maintain my level of counselor identity in those experiences to make sure I'm really managing the stress experience of my colleagues. It's often one of my biggest tasks in managing threat, to make sure everyone stays in the model. So, yeah. So I put clear and present danger in there. This is the actual language. A couple of clarifications I want to make. First of all, who must report? So we had a question come up in just a while ago. So law enforcement officials. How many of you have SROs in your building, school resource officers? Okay, we have 2 in our building. So they can report clear and present danger. The other one is, this is how it's written, ready? School administrators, I'm one of those, so I'm a reporter. Principals, chief administrative officers, here we go, or their designees. I love it. I was actually so thankful that language went in there, although I know it's caused some people a lot of stress. Because designee gets interpreted in a lot of different ways depending on the school that you're in. So other designee means what? Whoever the principal wants to assign. It doesn't necessarily mean counselors, doesn't mean social workers or psychologists, designee. So here's an opportunity for a counselor to say, hey, I can help you out with this. I know about threat assessment. I know about suicide assessment. I know how to make sure students are safe, or we can make sure they're safe. I know how to talk to parents in this. I'm probably the person you want to work with in establishing reporting measures under clear and present danger. Principals would appreciate that. Some schools have really spun on this. I did kind of an informal poll of some administrators that I know really well recently, and I said, so I'm just curious, how many in your building, or how many of your buildings have very clear procedures for clear and present danger, and you're aware this process is happening? And these are people I know well, so they would tell me, 1 or 2 hands. The majority of them said, oh yeah, I knew about that, but I kind of forgot about it. I'm not quite sure if that was something we were supposed to be doing or not. And that majority was what that was. So what do I report? Oh, geez, I'm sorry. What do I report? That's on there. This is also in your handout too. It's also on the ISCA website. How do I report? This is a report to the Illinois State Police. So why clear and present danger? I think it's an important piece to know. You may know this already. Clear and present danger is about the FOIA card, firearms card. That's what this is about. So if you are reported as being a clear and present danger, if you have a FOIA card, it may be revoked. Or you could be prevented from getting a FOIA card. When I talked about this in Springfield last week, this is a big deal downstate because it's not unusual for 1 to 2-year-old for their birthday to get their FOIA card because the whole family has a FOIA card. You know, they use firearms. It's not unusual. It's just part of the culture. So this has become a big deal, I think a much bigger deal downstate. Yes, please.
Do you know how long that stays?
Boy, she asked me, do you know how long that lasts out there? I have not heard about that. Yep. And my staff asks me about that as well. I will say at this point, I am not aware of a situation occurring because we reported somebody. Now, I might not have students that have FOIA cards, but I'm not aware of anybody being prevented of one either, but we're only 2 years into this. So I think there's some yet to be seen things on this. The other important piece about reporting, and this is up here, but it helped my staff, so I want to make sure I make mention of it, is that when you report someone under clear and present danger, if that record was subpoenaed by the state police, the state police will take that record and expunge your name from it. It's part of that law. So you will not be identified as the person that reported clear and present danger. That surprises some people, but yes. Right. I'm going to break it up into 3 questions because I want to address them. One way is how do you let schools know that you have to do this? The second piece is what's your responsibility to talk to parents around this? Yes? And the third, I was going to ask a third question there too. Yeah, I mean, it was a really great statement. It made me think of a couple different things. And I'll chat about them now. The first piece as far as notifying parents when you've made a report under clear and present danger, again, I'm just talking about my school and district. In our threat model, clear and present danger procedure falls into high risk of harm. High risk of harm requires direct parent contact. So there's no mystery around that. Okay? And there's no, I know what it was. The second piece is what's our obligation to tell parents we filed? None. None. It's not in there. It's not in there. There's nothing in there about informing parents that you filed that report. However,
They're high risk, but we don't mention that this was.
there's not, I would say there's nothing in the law about that. What you decide to do is tell people we filed this. No, however, we have this in our discipline code. So we have some threat procedures in our discipline code that say if we determine a student's high risk of harm, these are our procedures. Yep.
Calling the parents.
Correct.
Because when the parents
Nope.
don't have a child, we do not do that.
I understand. Okay.
So are you concerned, and this is a concern that
Yeah.
schools and districts.
Please.
So one day discovers that he can't because he's with fire.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand the court is going to respond to
Uh-huh.
that, they're not going to know. But would the student know when they're trying, not
Yeah.
as an adult, this is their Second Amendment right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to get a gun,
Right.
they're telling me I can't.
Right.
I want to know who
Right.
and when they took that right away from me
Right.
because it's my right, it's my
Right.
constitutional right. So wouldn't in that moment or place be able to say, oh, it was your high school actually.
Yeah.
About 3 years ago.
You know, so,
And you were,
no, so, yeah. So the question is really, is there concern down the road, students finding out? The question is, I don't know. It hasn't happened. And that has caused my staff concern as well. However, it is a legal responsibility. Eric, I'm sorry, what? I'm sorry, I was just kind of summarizing. I'll do a better job, I promise. I'll do a better job. Thank you for reminding me, I really appreciate it. It's caused us concern as well. Yes, please. So the question is about us showing interest in ROTC. Maybe they had a report filed on them. What would happen to them moving forward? Another great answer, I don't know. I don't. I appreciate the concern. These scenarios, this is so new, we haven't seen it flesh out yet. I do not know if the military is calling the state police and saying, has somebody filed a clear and present danger report on this student? I don't know. If somebody else knows, it'd be great. Yes?
Because this is an Illinois law, do we know how this is across other states?
I don't. This is Illinois. Illinois State Police are the holders of this law. It's a great question. I'm sorry I don't have a direct answer for you.
Other states have something similar to keep track like that data in terms of situations happening afterwards.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Lori was asking if other states have data they've tracked how that's happened. I'm not sure. Yes, please.
Besides applying for a FOIA card, does it show up anywhere?
No. Yeah, that's the only consequence. It's the only consequence in this. Either you get your FOIA card revoked or it prevents you from getting one. That's what this is about. It's not about getting services for student. That's why I don't want to confuse this, because I've heard some confusion around this, that if I report this, then the kid gets some help. Those things are not connected. This is only about the report to the state police. So I thought it would be helpful to show you in the threat model where it falls, because I think it's a bigger issue than just reporting on clear and present danger. Real quick, one more question and I'll go on. Yeah, question is, does anything happen to the parent's FOIA card? In this law, I don't see anything about a parent FOIA card being revoked. I've not heard anything. I'm going to offer another caveat, and hopefully I'll remember to say it again. Anything that's in our threat model, in my building, I can't stress this enough, as far as the disclaimers around this, we've received legal consult on from our law firm. In the clear and present danger legislation, it says, consult your law firm. Okay? So that's my big disclaimer. So, because I don't want people leaving and said, Vince said, coming out of here, Vince suggested, Vince recommended, Vince had a thought about this. Vince did not have any answers, though, because you need to vet this out in your own space, because different districts are classifying designees and how this procedure is happening. But I am going to share with you where I think it should fall. And this is more of an opinion on my end, on how we've done in our district, and how I think it can be helpful for you. So I gave you our threat model. We just did this last year. It's not copyrighted. If you want to use it, you want to tear it apart, I'll find. If you want me to send it electronically, I'll do that too. However it can be helpful. So we recognize, and this is where I'm going to talk about the assessments too, okay? So in our threat model, we have a little flow chart thing that we like. I will share with you, too, that we used to have a threat model that incorporated threat to self and threat to others in the same model. And that caused us problems. Some things got a little confused. One thing that happened was we do threat to self 50 times more than threat to others. Yes? Okay, good. Great. And then when the law happened, we needed to know where to put that into what we do. We had a pretty good understanding of how we're assessing threat in the building, threat to self. I'm going to talk threat to self right now. And as we went through scenarios, we were almost right on track for what everybody was doing and how they were assessing threat. Okay? But we have some measures in place that help support the actions that we take. This is, again, our district decided to do. Overall, we took some of the decision-making out of the hands of the clinicians, meaning that, and this is back to the assessment, we never wanted to be in a situation, this was a legal counsel suggestion too, to make a threat decision based on an assessment. If you have a hunch that the student is a threat, go with your hunch 100% of the time. The reason is because you can never be wrong, right? But you can be really wrong if you don't go with your hunch. Really wrong really fast. And so if you have a student take a assessment, a suicide assessment, some great ones out there. I said Ray gave some great tools today. I put some up on the screen here that we have. And if you give the student the assessment and they fill it out and you score it and it looks like they're not suicidal, and you say, oh, looks like everything's okay. I don't know why I gave you that instrument. My bad. Take care. That doesn't make sense, does it? You never do that. However, I have heard about some schools using assessment measures to make decisions about what they're going to do for students and how they're going to get help. Very dangerous place to be. So this is Vince's opinion, and how we're doing our model is not that. So when you see these screeners here, these were screeners that we looked at and we purchased. Most of them are free. And we have stored, because the reason we use screeners, if you can see this, suicide risk assessment tools to be used as information to be shared with outside treatment providers and or parents. So when we have reluctant students, reluctant parents about getting assessment, this is really helpful. We send this right over to the treatment facility before they show up for their screening. Right away. I want to let you know, we've sent staff to the hospital before they get there to talk to the social worker who's going to do the screening and say, hey, here's our risk assessment that we are building. Thought this might be helpful because we have a hunch they may minimize what's actually happening. That happens, yes? Yep, okay. We were never that proactive in that until a couple of years ago. But we really ramped that up and made that a lot cleaner for ourselves. So that's how we use screeners. Our legal consult said the exact same thing that I just shared with you. So some of this is best practice, some of this came from our legal consult, was don't use screeners to make decisions. Use screeners to gather information, to help you move things forward. Does that make sense? Is that a clear enough distinction? Okay. So now we're going to assess the level of risk. This piece here I think is important. You're going to see in our other threat model too, consultation. So this is this is a Vince kind of ism. If you work in isolation, no matter how great of a counselor you are, if you work in isolation, you'll make mistakes. If I work in isolation, I'm going to make mistakes. This work is too complicated and too personal for us that if we don't take advantage of consultation and supervision, but especially consultation in these situations, we'll make mistakes. So consultation is in our model all the time. We talk about it amongst our counselors and psychs and social workers. I have some at the conference and nobody came to the session. I'm glad they didn't. They don't need to hear me again. They're tired of hearing me. But I have them talk about it. It's something we talk about and train around is consultation in our department. How does this actually work? How do I have a conversation with you? So it feels like conversation. So it feels like consultation. We're very intentional about that. I just want to make sure that was a really important piece. I know I talked about that this morning a little bit. I just think it's such a valuable skill that we all have that sometimes we're not as intentional about as we should be. So then we're assessing the level of risk. So we have low risk of harm, moderate risk, and high risk. Okay? And then you see the steps underneath that, and you'll see clear and present danger right here. So clear and present danger happens in our model in high risk of harm. Imminent harm. I have a plan. If you let me leave, I'm going to go carry it out. Imminent harm. Some places have filed clear and present danger every time a kid talks about suicidal ideation. That's not necessarily imminent harm, right? We know what suicidal ideation looks like. Kids that have plans look different. I'm not minimizing suicidal ideation, don't get me wrong. There are steps we take when there's suicidal ideation as well that get kids help and work with parents. I'm just differentiating between what's imminent harm and moderate or low risk of harm for us. And to show you where clear and present danger falls. Hopefully this might be helpful as you talk about this in your building, about when and how you have to file clear and present danger to have it fit within a model. Again, your model might look different than us. If you don't have a threat model for self, it's a great conversation to have. So what are you doing? What are you doing? And how are you doing it? Oh my gosh. Because you might have 3 or 4 different methods of assessing risk of harm. Great professional dialogue to occur. I also put this in your packet too. This was in Ray's packet, or some of it was, other threat models that we looked at. Many of these are free. If you're interested in looking for things, lots of resources. People that write these are very generous people as well. They're often researchers at universities, and they're looking to get information back from you, and have made some great relationships with some of the authors of these assessments. This model here is our threat to others. I'm going to kill the cross-country team. Threat to others. Yes? I'm going to stab the teacher. Threat to others. Yes? What are some of the top 10 ones that we've had in the last 2 years? I'm gonna... Oh, this is a good one. Oh, geez, how does this stuff happen? You know, it's just so sad that people get in such dark places. It really is. So I'm sorry I'm making light of things, but again, it helps sometimes. I'm going to shut that kid in the locker and light that locker on fire. Yeah. Wow. Amazing. Yeah. Sad stuff. Threat to others. That's what we're talking about here. So we're evaluating the threat using our alpha team. Alpha team means we're on alpha slices. So we have 2 counselors that share an alpha with a psych or social worker and a dean. That's their alpha team. The reason we bring in the dean for threat to others is because often there's other collateral things going on around that threat that can result in disciplinary measures. And that's why we bring our deans. Our deans are primarily discipline and attendance in our building. I know they're not like that everywhere, but that's how they are with us. But we're gathering information about the specific threat, writing down the threat. This is really an important point. So if you have asked someone just anecdotally to share with you what the threat was, and they start talking about it, then you have somebody else tell you about the threat, and they start talking about it, you'll get 2 different stories. People will leave stuff out. Professionals. They'll only highlight the things that they heard that were important to them. So writing down collaboratively what the threat is really helps the clarity of moving forward. Considering the circumstances. Oh, this is a big one, right? So we're using diagnostic information. So back to Jana, our student, considering circumstances. Maybe there's some family stuff going on that we need to take into account about getting back at the teacher. Maybe it has nothing to do with the teacher and not acting immediately. It's not zero tolerance. It's about using our great counseling assessment skills to make really thoughtful decisions in this process. So we go to step 2 then, and we're making a decision. Is it a transient threat? Transient. Or is it serious threat or serious threat? If we're a transient, we only have one more step. Disciplinary action. This is the one, I'm going to beat his ass. Transient threat. Not imminent harm. Okay? We're going to fight after school. Imminent harm? No. Disciplinary measure? Yes! Yes! Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's where that stops, in that transient threat. Over here, though, and I like to call this, it's like pushing the snowball down the hill. Once you start that snowball, get out of the way. Because a lot of things happen really fast and very automatically, mostly because it involves SROs. are school resource officers. Or if you don't have police officers in your building, as soon as you call police, get out of the way, because they have very prescribed procedures that they need to do. This upsets my staff sometimes, because once the police are involved, they have things they have to do, and they take control of situations. I just offer that to you. If you haven't had experience with police, it's better to have these conversations before it happens. So I talk with our SROs about our threat model when they come into our building, how this looks, and I'm very aware that once I contact them and they're involved, I'm out of the way. I expect things to happen. Now, that doesn't mean I don't stay within consultation range with our SROs. Sometimes some things have happened that we've had to converse about. That's a more difficult conversation to be in once the threat's in place. Just a editorial caveat. Oh, geez, sorry. So we report that threat. It's an important piece. It usually is coming to me if I'm not around, like today. Other administrators are trained in the threat model and they know how to move forward. Down in the bottom here, this is where you're going to see clear and present danger. Right here. So it's in our steps down here. Okay? Imminent harm. Okay? This year, I'm in a building of about 2,800 students. I thought before the conference it'd be helpful to know how many we've filed this year. So I went back and looked in the file, and we've filed 7. I don't know if that's high or low. I think we're pretty consistent in it. And I went through and read them, and yep, these are all, yep, this all works. I usually hear about them. DCFS, a couple dozen, I think we were at 35, I think, or 30 DCFS reports this year. It's just different, right? When I went and looked at suicidal ideation, that's a code that we have in our system that our professionals use. I mean, it's many more students than that. So 7 was about imminent harm. 2 of those were imminent harm to others. 5 were imminent harm to self. That's been disturbing too. Oh my gosh, kids doing attempts on campus. Have you guys had that? Oh my gosh, I've had 2 this year, attempts on campus. I had 1 last year. You always happen off campus. The on-campus thing, and I kind of think it's a positive. I'm really glad they're doing it on campus, because that's where the people are that can help. They're not by themselves. I mean, it's horrible, right? I mean, you do a suicide attempt on campus, but at least there's a lot of people there to help immediately and get the student the assistance they need. I just put these questions out here as a way to maybe organize a team's conversation around threat assessment. Again, if you don't have a model, I think it's just a really good process to go through. Oh, I meant to say this earlier. The other thing in crisis situations, I apologize, the questions reminded me of this. When you're in crisis situation happening, sometimes logic disappears. And people who aren't trained in threat assessment tend to just think, this sounds like a good idea, I'll do this. And that causes problems. Really fast, it causes problems. So when you have a model to work from, it really helps. So I didn't share with you our crisis plan that happens when we're actually in crisis. It wasn't a part of this presentation. But we just had a crisis 3 weeks ago. We had a student die. A member of our senior class. Very, very sad. And boy, the first thing I did, I went and got my crisis response out. And I've done this a bunch of times. But I never do it without that in front of me. And I go, okay, now it's this, now it's this, now it's this. Now I go here, and I'm doing this, and I'm doing this, and I'm doing this. Same thing here. It takes the guesswork out of the process. I just can't. If you walk away with anything, I'd like you to walk away with that you want to take the guesswork out of this process. How are we doing here? Oh, good. We talked about managing stressful situations. Oh, this is interesting. Can I just share this with you? This is cool. So there was this research study that came out, it was like 2002, 2003, and it was looking at how people respond in crisis situations. So there's kind of 3 groups of people. There's the largest group of people. Now, I'll talk smallest group. The smallest group of people is about 10% of the population. Do you know how they respond to crisis situations? Life-threatening situations. Scream. Ah! Scream, ah! Cry, right? We've seen this. We had lockdown this year. I had kids, right? And then the largest group is about 60 to 70% of the population, deer in headlights. Waiting for someone to come tell them what to do. It's okay if you have those people on your staff, because they're really good when you say, I need you to go to this classroom and talk to this group of kids. Great, got it. They're not necessarily there to volunteer, because they don't know. It's the protective factor there. Then there's this other group of people, 20 to 30%. You know what's unique about this group? Give me an idea. Do you guys know? Do you know, Happy? They act? No? What?
They just act as do.
They do, but why? No? They share something. No. What they share, and this is what the study found, and this is why you have threat models, and this is why you talk about this.
The understanding of.
Yes, and they share the understanding. Lori just said they share the understanding. They share the understanding because they've already been through a life-threatening situation before. Or they've been trained in how to respond in a life-threatening situation. Both of those pieces. That's why we do fire drills. That's what I tell kids, right? That's why we do fire drills. You're drilling for that process to happen. So you have a framework of understanding of how to be in that situation. Please.
Yeah, 'cause I was just thinking about the people with the deer in the headlights, that a lot of it, I don't think is panic. I think people don't want to make the situation worse.
Absolutely. It's not. I'm not saying it's panic. It's not. It's looking for direction. Yep. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just how people respond. So when you're in a crisis situation, whether it's a threat situation or not, you'll notice three groups of people. Be aware of that, because each one needs a little bit different coaching through the situation. Okay? Eric's contain, deer in headlights, give very specific directions. Those that understand what to happen, put them in leadership role to tell other people what to do. Right? Okay. Some more questions, again, for your process. I know I wouldn't get through everything here. I really like the action plans, too, for school leaders. And some references there, but we're kind of out of time. But I did say, please, if you have questions about this, you want to talk more, give me a call. Email me, whatever. I'm more than happy to talk through more. And my gosh, thanks for coming. I really appreciate it.